warm welcome to today's meeting of Democrats of Greater Tucson. My name is Larry Bodine, and I'm the president. And we have a wonderful candidate for us to speak to us today, State Representative Andres Cano. Andres has served in the Arizona House of Representatives since 2019, and now he is running for re-election in the new legislative LD20. He's got a 5-point economic program, which includes building an economic recovery, healthcare for all, supporting public education, protecting the environment, and reforming the criminal justice system. And prior to elected office, Andres served as a senior aide for beloved Pima County Supervisor Richard Elias in 2012. And in that year, he was the youngest policy advisor in Pima County's history. And in his non-legislative role, Andres is the director of the philanthropic LGBTQ Alliance Fund. And with that, Andres, the floor is yours. Go right ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Larry, and hello to all of you for braving out a day that usually is dedicated to, family observance, all of that. Here you are being the good Democrats that you are, paying close attention to how we can continue to transform our state. And I think that that is really where I'm coming to you all with open arms today. It's been about 3 years since I have presented to DGT. I may have somewhere in the middle of the pandemic, folks, but I want to thank you for being one of the region's largest and oldest organizations that's committed to ensuring that folks are staying engaged, that they know who not only is in office, but who wants to hold the purse strings to be able to have whatever influence that person is running for. You all are doing that. I'll take a step back really by just acknowledging Supervisor Elias and all that he did for our region's Democratic Party, and most importantly for the issues that we care about. Today, I'll talk to you a little bit about my time at the Arizona State House, but I really have to acknowledge the people who've gotten me to where I'm at today. Supervisor Elias, of course, being an incredible mentor, and I see some incredible LD3, LD20 champions in here, in Michael, in Lee, in Dr. Warren. I think we're now in the fold. I'm now your representative. And so it's just an honor. Caroline, there you are. Lucy, one day I'll represent you. And I'm going to start off with kind of what's going on at the state capitol right now, because I think this is a pretty highly engaged group. You all know that for the last 5 weeks, we've really been held in this hostage situation, trying to figure out what we are going to do with your $13 billion budget. The governor has proposed a little bit more of an increase, surprisingly, to our state allocation than he did in his budget proposal last year. But no surprise, there are some in the GOP majority here in Arizona that think that government should be not growing, but should be getting smaller. And so therein lies the problem with the 31-29 in the House, 31 Republicans, 29 Democrats in the House, and of course in the Senate, 16 Republicans and 14 Democrats. What we have been sharing among those 5 weeks to the majority party is that if you want to do what Arizonans have been wanting us to do for quite some time now, since they sent this closely almost evenly split legislature to represent all of you and our values as a whole wide state, why don't we come together to be able to pass a bipartisan budget once and for all that will be able to make the investments that we need to be able to make so that we can move our state forward. One of those E's that Larry was talking about that I'll start with is, of course, our public education system. I am so proud to have been elected at the height of the Red for Ed movement, but more importantly, to continue holding the GOP accountable with the investments that they have yet to make in our state public schools. We've got a recruitment and retention issue right before us, lowest per pupil spending in the nation. And of course, a reality, a political reality where teachers are being pitted against parents. And that is a sad world. And what we know from just continued legislation left and right throughout our state is, and our country, is that there's a deliberate culture war on public education right now. We've got to put an end to that. We've got to be able to stand up to the world-class schools that we have that opportunity to be able to write a bright new future for our kids. And that, and for first and foremost, will always be my priority at the state capitol. We've got a lot of work to do and a $5 billion surplus to be able to invest in our schools right now at this very moment. So when Doug Ducey wants to go give his tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires, or when the GOP party says we want to cut, I'm going to be reminding them of all the investment that we can make in our K-12 schools because it's the right thing to do. My second E is going to be focused on the environment, folks. I'm so grateful to have been a leader in environmental policy the last 4 years, but really it's the people on this call that have ensured that I maintain that value as a top priority from my earliest engagement with the Sierra Club to all of the work that we've been doing left and right to introduce legislation that we know will make a difference. Reducing our dependence on foreign oils, doing something about clean air and clean water, eliminating any kind of tax subsidies that support our fossil fuel industry. I mean, these are the kinds of things that we ought to be making because a cleaner energy means a cleaner economy, a cleaner future. And we have the bills. You all know that the guest that you're going to be seeing next week, who I've endorsed for Congress, Kirsten Engel, and I have introduced over many legislative cycles, environmental legislation to move the needle. What's happened? You know the answer. It's our bills literally just collect dust on a bookshelf because in particular, the Republican chairwoman of the Natural Resources Committee, Gail Griffin, you may recognize the name from Cochise County, refuses to give our bills any daylight. Shame on Gail Griffin and shame on the legislature for not taking this clean energy economy seriously. It's no longer political. All we've got to do is look outside, feel the air, see the extreme drought, look at the water lines in our water supply to be able to determine in our lakes where the problem is. I really want to get to questions, so I'm not going to bore you with full answers until we get to the meat of our conversation. But, you know, I've talked a lot about a clean energy economy, and let's talk about the economy because it's what we're thinking about right now, right? We've got inflation absolutely soaring. We have unemployment that thankfully has gotten to a point, the lowest under this Biden administration than we've ever seen in over 30 years. That's good. But I'm here coming to you from the perspective of a minority majority district where we still have a lot of need, and housing is the most important thing that we can do right now to make solid investments in Arizonans, in their hope, right? Home ownership used to be something that was the dream that we all aspired to have. It's not even attainable anymore with the current prices. And for renters like mine, who I help every single week try to get some rental aid support if they need it, I have no idea how the Republican majority can continue ignoring constituents from all walks of life. I mean, even people who are making $40,000 or $50,000 a year are having trouble paying their rent right now. And I heard somebody tell me 60% of their paycheck is now going toward housing. What do we've got to do? We've got to invest in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. At its height, under the Napolitano era, that was about a $40 million investment. Hey, $5 billion surplus. I think we can afford 40 million or 50 million or 100 million, as I heard in a legislative roundtable last week, to go toward the Housing Trust Fund. What does that do was a question I was asked on in my LD20 the other day. The Housing Trust Fund invests in homeless shelters. It invests in short-term 3 to 6 month recovery periods for housing support. And then, of course, it also is going to help boost the supply that we need desperately right now to be able to help those Arizonans who are homeless or on the verge of being homeless. We learned through the pandemic, folks, after so many people being on the state's unemployment roll, that we've got the lowest, no surprise, unemployment benefits in the world, in the nation, excuse me. $240 a week is the maximum benefit, and you're not guaranteed the maximum of 240. Other states, right next to us, they're in the 400 to 500 range. Some are even 600. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that we are incentivizing people staying home. It means that we are telling Arizonans, we believe you're worth more than $960 a month to be able to survive and pay your bills. That's how I see that kind of reverse psychology when the Republicans try to say we shouldn't be incentivizing folks staying home. Last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about two areas that are of critical importance and that are really twined, aligned with the mission that we are trying to do to transform our state at the legislature. And that's, of course, our elections. We have seen since 2020 a refusal to accept any kind of reality that is not a win for the Republican Party. If they lose, gosh, something must have happened. There must have been fraud. We have never lived in this kind of environment, this kind of moment. And we've had difficult times on our end, right? When we have not won elections or decisions, we move on, right? From the 2020 election, I wish that would be a completely different environment. I mean, look what happened in 2000, folks. You remember when we lost that election and the Supreme Court handed that to us. What did we do? We moved forward. We kept going. We elected the first African-American president in 2008. We did that again in 2012. And when we regrettably lost to that other number 45 in 2016, what did we do? We kept going. Never before have we created an insurrection or the mentality of insurrection the way that the majority has. And as our Speaker of the House currently says, perhaps you tell your Republican friends, if you've got some, I'm sure you do, because I do too, take back your party from this cult is what we have been trying to get the GOP to understand, because it is absolute lunacy. And we have seen the trickle down effects of all of that at our state legislature. And so elections matter, and our freedom to vote matters. The ability for us to not have to disenfranchise voters in our indigenous communities, Latino communities, Black, Asian American, all of the communities that we know we've been trying to for decades to get engaged, to get mobilized, are worth more than us just saying, we're going to strip them all off of the voter roll, get them off of the early voter list, which, by the way, as you know, is not even the permanent early voter list in Arizona. It's the active early voter list. Thank you, Doug Ducey. These are all opportunities for the last and final 5E before I just kind of conclude and listen to your questions, and that's engagement and mobilization. We've talked about first, education. We've talked about environment. We've talked about the economy. And we've also talked about the freedom to vote through our elections. And the final E for me just has to do with about what do we do differently as a party to have folks stay focused in 2022, because we know that in midterm elections, it is so much harder to get folks engaged. They're not as mobilized by the national politics of the world. And I think what we've got to continue doing, and I'm really just thinking about this from the perspective of somebody who talks to voters at their doors, who likes engaging folks, non-traditional audiences that need our engagement. We have got two historic moments in the last month alone that have absolutely allowed us to open our eyes as to why every election, but certainly the 2022 election, is consequential. I will tell you, I will do everything in my power as one of 90 lawmakers, as one Southern Arizona lawmaker, to keep people engaged, because that's what we need in 2022. And when we have abortion rights on the line the way that we do, and we're going to have a Supreme Court decision very soon, that better wake people up. You all have worked too damn hard to be able to see all of our rights and liberties stripped away the way that they are by this activist court right now. And if abortion rights are coming first, what's next? What is the trickle down impact? I'm the youngest LGBT member of the legislature. When I'm ready to make that decision to be able to have a partner who I'm going to spend the rest of my life with and make that legal decision, that should never be questioned by our state, or by our country. And of course, on a very somber tone, we all don't have to relive what happened last week in Texas, but we do have to remind our legislative majorities who are in power of the legislation that's ready right now at this very moment to protect Arizonans from the next massacre and the next episode of gun violence that has become too familiar to all of us. And we know the impact, because we saw what happened to our Congresswoman. We saw what happened to the multiple families that were impacted by all of this. And if the Speaker of the House and the Senate President here in Arizona wanted to ensure, for instance, that background checks would be a requirement prior to purchasing or owning a firearm, they have that piece of legislation. We've introduced it. It's ready to go. I hope that they offer that tomorrow morning on Tuesday. I'm not going to hold my breath because I expect them to blame all of the other things other than themselves and their lack of political leadership to try to get us to think what is happening and what are we doing. And the answer from your legislature on gun violence is nothing. We are, quite frankly, looking the other way, even when our neighbors are being impacted so greatly by all of this. And so those are the two issues, going back to engagement, going back to electoral politics, and the last E. We need organizations like DGT, like our party, and like all of you who are willing to chip in. And I know you are. I'm excited to continue being a part of this movement. I am running unopposed, but I wanted to have the opportunity to come say hi to all of you, because I don't think that running unopposed means that you do nothing. In fact, in our district, LD20 now, the most Democratic district in the state of Arizona, including downtown, the U of A, the West Side, Amphi, Flowing Wells, the Pasquayaki Nation. I now go all the way out between Broadway, Broadway and Grant. Country Club is my most north border now. So I'm just grateful to be able to represent all of you. And Larry, I see that there are a lot of hands up right now. It's a big district. If some of you are on the call who are now absorbed into the new LD20, I look forward to canvassing your neighborhood. Let's go knock on doors. We'll do it together. And thank you for the opportunity to be here with all of you.
Well, thank you, Andres. We're so delighted that there's a guy like you in the state legislature. And so turning now to questions, Joe Danishevsky has his hand up. Go ahead, Joe.
Sure. From the chat room, our first question, Lee Oler asks, your race looks fairly safe. Which race do you suggest we work on to get the majority in the Arizona Legislative House and Senate?
Well, I think every legislative district, and thank you, Lee, for the great question, because yeah, thank goodness, District 20 is going to be just fine, both in the legislative House and Senate race. I think what we absolutely have to do right now is to be looking at every single district throughout the state and try to figure out what are we going to do in the final days to be able to ensure that we are having conversations directly with people at their doorsteps now and not 2 or 3 weeks before the election. And so I want to tell you that right now in our state, we've got 5 competitive districts. There's really only one in Southern Arizona that we have a bit of an ability to influence, and that's the district that I used to represent, actually on the far west of the district. And that's like West Tucson, and it goes into Cochise County. That is a prime district that we have a unique opportunity to be able to support right now. And that's the legislative district number 16, if I'm not mistaken. The others that are the high priority districts throughout the state, I'm going to read them off right now: 2, 4, 9, and 13. 2, 4, 9, and 13. I've often told my legislative district, if we want to use some of our money that we raise throughout the year to go out into another district, perhaps in Maricopa County, where those other 4 target districts are, why don't we on a Saturday rent a bus, make use of that dollar to be able to go in, knock on some doors, host a phone bank, give folks the people power that they need. But to answer your question, Lee, 16 is where I would go here locally to the west side, or maybe take a drive up to Pinal County, where some of that district is now shared. Or let's get on a bus and go to those other Maricopa districts, 2, 4, 9, and 13.
Very much. Let's now turn to Lee Oler. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
It was just, Joe just read it, and that was my big question. I was hoping that Andres would say 16, because I think there's a possibility there to do something. So my question was just answered, Larry.
All right. Let's turn to Shirley Muni. She's got her hand up too.
Thanks. I've never had an economics course, but every article I see in the business pages of the paper or magazines say the economy is very strong. We have low unemployment. Businesses are doing well. New businesses are forming. We have a $5 billion surplus. Britain has finally gotten around to actually putting a surtax on oil and gas companies because of their excess profits. We can't do that. I don't know why. It's politics. How can we be in such an inflationary situation when everyone says the economy is strong?
Well, Shirley, I'm not an economist, and I feel like I also get confused, and because I see the emails from my constituents, right? And when folks don't know where to turn, when they see a $300 increase for their housing overnight, I did hear a theory the other day, and I'm not going to specifically answer your question, Shirley, because I don't know the answer. And my transparency has always been you get what you get. I heard, 2 years of people not going to a lot of places during the pandemic. They sat down, they have a little bit of investment, they're willing to buy some nicer products because they have it. They're not really bringing in more, but that is kind of confusing everything as well. And that's what I heard, right? And I think there may be some good answers in all of this, but I think where I'm at is that with these decisions that I have as one of your 90 legislators moving forward, Shirley, we've got a $5 billion surplus. If you look to the west and look at California's surplus, for instance, it's triple digit, by the way. We have a unique opportunity right now, I think, to do something other than just provide tax cuts. The Republican version of economics is tax cuts. Just like we approved last year, right? We got rid of one of the tax brackets for higher income earners. And I'm okay with people doing well in life. I'm okay with them being able to get back money that, the Republican majority believes is theirs, and it is. What I'm not okay with is the disparity of income taxation. And when these Ducey tax cuts last year provided $30 to the hardworking people of Arizona, the average earners, right? If you are making between $50,000 and $70,000 a year annually, you got $30 in a Ducey tax cut, while somebody a little bit higher net worth, right? A lot higher net worth, got upwards of $20,000, $40,000 in tax cuts. I mean, get real, right? Who needs the investment? And I think it's everyday people, Shirley, and that's why we're still trying to make those investments. And no matter what happens to the economy right now, I think everybody's in agreement that this housing market is bringing some uncomfortable remnants of 2006 and 2007, where a burst is going to happen because people cannot afford a roof over their heads. Hi, Lucy Messing.
Right. Actually, Lucy is up next. She has a question. Go ahead and unmute. Go ahead, Lucy.
Thanks. Hi, Andre. So good to see you. I have a question about tomorrow because we're having an action. AEA is having an action at the Capitol. What is the schedule going to be at the Capitol? Because we're supposed to be there from 10 to 11. I don't have the room numbers yet, but I know that AEA Retired is setting up a tent outside for people to check in and go wherever. Do you have an idea of what we can expect tomorrow in terms of anything happening? Are we going to expect most people to be there? What's the story?
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. I'm so grateful for AEA for being the leading entity at the state capitol right now, asking for some justice for our teachers and for the kids, more than 1 million kids in our public schools here in Arizona. And especially what I appreciated last week, we are the day after the Texas shooting, and the next morning, the Republican leadership decides to put a critical race theory ban on the floor calendar. It was and attempted to almost throw out the public educators that were in the gallery because they were disagreeing with their presence there. And I just think that was baloney. And I'm glad that it brought me remnants of my first year when like we just loved to fight, because what else do we've got when we're not being listened to, right? And it's like it was a protest on the House floor, Lucy, and I was the one yelling shame because I don't care, expel me for speaking some truth to my colleagues. Lucy, tomorrow we're going to be there at 1:15 in the House. It is not certain if we're going to be adjourning for the rest of the week. That's what we've been doing, right? We come in on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and we'll be back for the following day, or they'll tell us, don't have our act together and see you next week, which is my guess is what's going to happen. But 1:15 is the only thing on my schedule right now, and I'm not aware of anything else happening. Hope that answers your question, but I can't wait to see you tomorrow.
All right. We have a question from our treasurer, Steve Linder. Go right ahead.
Hi, Andreas. I'm so proud that you're up there representing us, and I'm proud to be an AEA member also, retired. But I guess my question really is kind of piggybacking with Lucy, is that as far as the Democrats and the budget process, do you see them coming? Do you see being any part of the process at all? Or do you just see it sitting back and having whatever the Republicans decide between themselves thrown at you? I mean, do you see them coming to you when they can't have enough votes, or how do you see the process going?
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate the question. I'm happy to support a bipartisan budget personally, and I've never voted for a budget in the 4 years that I've now have the opportunity to. And I'll do it with some caveats. I'm not saying yes to any tax cuts. I'm not going to cut any state agencies' funding. And I think that the Republican Party is going to have to be faced with some realities in the next 3 weeks. We are supposed to have a budget for you in less than 32 days. I'm not interested in a clean, skinny budget. I'm not interested in us providing any more tax cuts than we already have. And so if the majority party comes to us next week and they say, we've got a budget, would you like to go on it? I'm gonna look at it. I'm gonna observe it. I won't be one of the first few that they reach out to, by the way. I'm a little too progressive and too far left, right? And what I hope my caucus and my colleagues remember, and throughout all of this too, is something that has to be off the table, Steve, is also ESA voucher expansions. That's what one member wants right now on the Republican side. That's what he's kind of waiting for. That's a hell no for me. We're not going to go back to discussing that issue. Voters have already said no to that, and they did so overwhelmingly. And so if there's a budget presented that invests in housing, invests in people, invests in the quality infrastructure that we know we need, we should look at it. And I was told last week by a majority member, just to give you some more background about where they're at, is that they're prepared to make that ask in a couple of days, because they've got a caucus of 8 on the House side alone that is wanting us to cut. And so that already goes to show you how many of us they'll need when we're just kind of talking brass tacks. Hi, Dr. Warren.
Hey, we have a question from Barbara Warren. Barbara, go right ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Andres. There's an awful lot of things to be working on, but it's still getting hotter and drier, and forest fires are burning and our water's going away. And so I had a 2-part question. One is to thank you very much for your championing the effort to develop statutes to protect outdoor workers from extreme heat exposure. And I'm wondering how we can help you to move that forward and to get that passed in our state. We have a federal law, as we know. Ralph Verhoeven championed that, and it's waiting to be passed in the Senate. But we need our state to have statutes in place to protect people from the continuing rising heat. The other thing is understanding that the Corporation Commission does a lot of things to address climate change through regulating fossil fuels. I'm wondering if you can think of, or have thought of, or are working on other approaches to addressing climate change in addition to heat protection?
Thank you, Dr. Warren. I'm so grateful for the question, and especially for your advocacy of protecting our outdoor workers from the extreme elements in our state. You're absolutely right. We're living in a hotter, drier environment. We live in the desert, and it's an absolute travesty to see on record dozens of deaths over the years related to heat exposure. And the bill that you and I have worked on that I'm grateful to have introduced 2 years in a row now, we'll do it again next year, is going to be focused on providing the core tenets of what I believe are just and moral things to do. Water, shade, and cool down periods should not be controversial for those in triple digit heat. And I know that you and I have talked about, what's the threshold for a hot environment? I mean, 90 degrees is hot, right? And I made the decision, to prioritize this because I know that there are people every single day who are exposed to the elements that over time, people like the construction workers in my family. I think about the teenagers who are working minimum wage jobs at Starbucks the other day that I yelled at because they're taking the order outside, and it's just like, where's the shade? And the manager tells me, well, it's coming, and it's like, it's not coming. It's corporate America doing its thing, and trying to make this all happen. So, Dr. Warren, what can we do differently? We need to make our circle a little bigger. We need to get more business leaders who employ outdoor workers to be able to share their story. I think that there's some compassion among people who do happen to have employers out there who do the right thing, who put the igloo of water out there, who have a tent that their workers can be out next to and have those cool down periods. And I think as when you get told no for so long as you do in the minority party at the legislature, you get a little frustrated and a little jaded. And I think a good way of breaking some of that cycle right now is for us to collect some more stories and not just the bad stories, right? Because those are difficult too. But that is quantitative numbers that we already have, right? I'm thinking we're going to need a little bit more storytelling to do, and I bet you already have that, Dr. Warren. And then really quick, on energy, on fossil fuels dependent, fossil fuel dependent Arizona. I really think that one thing that we have even failed to do as a state, and we are the state's largest employer is the state of Arizona, among the largest. We're not even talking about how we are transitioning to a cleaner energy economy with our buildings, with our transportation infrastructure, with the agencies that are super critical to us. I mean, can you imagine what a difference it would be for us to have a governor who would have an office of climate resiliency, for instance, right? It would mean everything for it to be a cabinet level position. And if states like New Mexico can do it, if other states around the country can use wind, solar, and the incredible ability to be able to use our natural resources as our best caretakers, why not? Why wouldn't we do that? So I think that's why I'm excited about electing a governor who will actually prioritize our issues. Kerry Lake certainly won't in 2022 and beyond, right? So I'm excited to be having climate justice be at the top of our conversation in 2022.
Don't forget electrification of our transportation system.
Oh yeah, no, I was just on that the other day, Dr. Warren, related to our school buses. I mean, right now, our public schools, the 1 million students in our public schools, if they are taking a bus, we had to force Governor Ducey to make investments of cleaner school buses by going to court. And we got a decent settlement to transition some of our school buses into cleaner buses. But, it shouldn't take that kind of, it shouldn't take litigation to do the right thing, don't you think? And more chargers, right? We don't even have a charger near the Capitol. And then I have to remind myself, it's not about the Capitol, it's about the people, right? Where are the electric chargers in the underserved areas? And for us to have to go left and right to be able to charge what is going to be our future electrical vehicles. Let's do this, Joe and Susie, and then I'm sure you guys have a lot of other things to talk about.
Well, actually, from the chat room, we have a question from Carol Gar, a little
Yeah.
different, but do you know anything about the state of the cat anti-declawing bill that was proposed?
I hear it's coming back. I hear that there is a lobbyist who's been hired on this. And so I think I would say, you know, it passed the House, it's waiting for action in the Senate is my understanding of the cat declawing bill, and has a Democratic sponsor. I think it's going to be one of those bills that's going to come in at the final stretch, to answer your question. Hi, Susie.
Yeah, actually,
Hi, Andres.
it was proposed by Republicans, so hopefully it's got bipartisan support.
Sorry, I should clarify. You're absolutely right. Mr. Kavanaugh is leading the way on this, but Dr. Shaw has, on our side, has been one of the prime advocates for this. And I think he's, Dr. Shaw has built a good relationship with the majority. I'd sometimes get envious about it, but not really. I'd rather be on the other side of the table. So I'm optimistic.
Okay, Susie, go right ahead.
Thank you, Andres. It's so good to see you. I was wondering why, of all of the anti-voting bills that have passed, why did Mr. Ducey select the one he did to veto?
And you'll have to remind me, Susie, I remember it was last week, right?
Yeah.
You remember what the content of it was? There have been over 30
No,
legislation.
and I'm not sure why he decided that that particular one shouldn't go through. But I mean, it defies logic to me. You know, we've got so many. Why didn't he just let that one go to the courts and spend that $5 billion for lawyers that we're going to need to hire to fight all of these battles in the court? You know,
Yeah,
I mean,
no, I'm reading, I did get emails over the weekend, and admittedly, I haven't checked my email, and so I was while you were explaining that. 2617 is the name of the bill that you're talking about, passed the House and Senate among party lines, and it would have required county recorders to cancel a person's voter registration
yes.
if they receive information that the person isn't a US citizen, moved out of the country, or for any reason isn't qualified to vote. So that's the summary. Number one, I think the governor recognizes that he can't say yes to the more than 30 pieces of legislation that directly attack our freedom to vote and that question the integrity of our elections. This one in particular was going to be litigated by lots of people left and right, because we know that as a country, we don't just look to which direction the wind is going to cancel a voter and say you are not allowed to vote. I mean, can you imagine the discrimination that would happen if an election official were like 1070 to say you don't look like you belong here, and so we're going to cancel your vote? So I think it was just marred. It was completely just infiltrated with all of the potential for litigation, and I'm glad, of course, that he vetoed it. And I think the residual effect of this is that we just have to not think of him as anything other than an anti-freedom, anti-democracy governor, because that's what he is, right? We've seen him limit our freedom and ability to vote for 2 consecutive cycles, and it's an audition. It's an audition for the national stage. Doug Ducey's last term is right now. And I think he's trying to demonstrate that he can sign legislation like this that boosts his profile. I call him the DeSantis wannabe sometimes, just to piss him off. And it doesn't work. I mean, not even Donald Trump likes Donald Ducey, right? It's not, so I don't know, maybe we should be celebrating that. But, you know, if we had a more common sense, reasonable governor, I'd be a little bit more grateful for his veto, Susie. But that would be my guess, is he was looking at how many fingers he had and said, okay, this one I'll say no to. What I'm more interested in, folks, is not so much what happens to this legislation, does it come back in another way, but how has Ducey pissed off this two-term legislator, Mr. Chaplick, who was the sponsor of the legislation that got vetoed, because I talked to you about the 8 legislators in the House who may not be interested in voting for that budget anymore. You may have a number 9, Susie, just for funsies. We'll see. I don't see any more questions. Oh,
Oh, wait, I
Chris.
got one from Mike Bryant. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Andres, so the decision was made somewhere above our pay grades, I guess, that we would not run 2 candidates in competitive districts 2 and 4, and instead single shot those districts, which has the knock-on effect of making it so that, you know, pretty much the best we can possibly hope for in the House is a 30-30 House. So presumably that would be a power sharing agreement of some sort. Have you had any discussions about that, and what would that look like in terms of the actual organization of the House if we were to do really well and capture 30 seats?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. We've never had a split like that. And I think the last 20 years, the Senate has deadlocked before, and that was an agreement that was made. I mean, you essentially have to share some chairmanships, share the budget, the entity, right? The House or the Senate budget. They're 2 different ones right now. But I'm going to answer kind of the question that I think more of you would be most interested in, which is a concern really that I've heard among Democratic circles about why didn't we run more districts, more candidates in more districts? You know, are we totally doing something wrong and a disservice by not trying to flip districts? And I think what's important for that answer is we've got to pay attention to what worked well in 2020. In 2020, we were the only state in the nation to hold our Democratic numbers and to maintain a seat, a +1, and we did that in the House. So no other state in the country did that. It was a hard year for legislatures throughout the country in 2020. So for us to maintain those numbers, be there and maintain it is a win. 2022, if you're like me reading any headline to try to figure out what's going to happen, it's going to be a very, very, very hard year. However, we gained a seat in the Senate. So now we went from 17 to 13 and 16 to 14. In a year where it's going to be so hard, right? Biden's numbers are not good right now. We know that, right? And we're trying really hard to make sure that we've all got the proper talking points to remind Americans that we actually have an opportunity for us to win on messaging because the facts speak for themselves. Right? I fully support the decisions that we made with the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee to have the 5 targeted districts. That does not mean that there's not going to be investment, Michael, beyond the legislative districts that are not in play, right? It's an organizational decision right now to only focus on those 5. And that is a better strategy. Wouldn't you rather us spend the $6 million on 5 target races so that we can preserve our numbers and celebrate again in 2 years, rather than spread it too thin in, let's say, 6 different districts, right? I mean, I'm not looking for a universal nod in all of this, but I think it's just the smart decision that we made, I guess, to answer your question, okay? We learned from 2020 that playing in anything other than a core focus, right? We played, I think, in 11 different districts in 2020. That was just too much. So we consolidated the focus, and our focus in a midterm to preserve our seats, I think, is an actual good strategy. It's going to suck for the next 2 years, but when has it not, right? In Arizona. And by the way, we've got incredible candidates in the primaries and in the general seats that we're going to be able to do an incredible compare and contrast of. So I'm still optimistic, and that seat that Vince Leach carved out for himself with the Independent Redistricting Commission, what's the new number? Some of you know it. 17?
Yeah.
That is in play, folks, not for this cycle, but for future cycles. So much so that we have candidates ready to spend on TV this year outside of the normal operations to set the tone for the 4 to 6 year strategy. You have to remember, look at where we were in 2010 with the makeup in the legislature to where we were in 2020, when our families were being ripped apart, when 1070 was being discussed and signed into law and tearing apart our nation. We made a commitment to be right where we're at 10 years, 12 years down the line. It took us 8 to get the 3129 and the 1713 in 2019. So the path continues. Be mobilized by the fact that we've got this split, and be ready for the day when we'll actually be governing.
Okay, thank you. We
Thanks
have a
for
question.
answering the unasked question, Andres.
Andrea Kennedy, go right ahead.
Am I unmuted? Yes, I am. Well, hi, Andres. Thanks for coming today. I realize really nothing can be done without a majority, but in the past 20 years or so, every so often someone comes up with the idea of a light rail from Tucson up to Flag. Any thoughts on this? Because I was thinking the other day just how much it would revolutionize the state if you could live in Flag and work in Phoenix, or live in Tucson and work in Phoenix. No one wants to live in Phoenix. But what do you think about that?
We need it all. And I dream of the day that we'll have that connection between Tucson and Phoenix to Flagstaff, of course. And you know, I've got some of my best friends on a train right now going up the coast of California, and it's a way to get around. It builds families, it builds memories, it builds connections, it builds all of the things that we know are important. I mean, at one point, that was the mode of transportation, right? And it's a funding issue. I'm grateful that Mayor Romero has prioritized even just discussing this, right, with our federal partners and with Mayor Pete, Secretary Pete, because we've got to do something to make the kind of investments that we know are needed. And I think that's where we're at. So I hope that answers your question. We need it. And but in terms of state legislation, I don't know that anybody has ever offered or introduced it. And I will ask, I am curious what other Democratic partners have, colleagues have, if they have, but I'm pretty sure that it'd be a huge federal proposal, would be my guess. I could be wrong.
All right, let's turn to Joe Danishevsky, who's got a question from the chat. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, actually, I think we're all done with the chat, but Andres, I want to say how refreshing it is that you've come up with a strategy to work with the prospective Democratic legislative districts. I think that is like job one, is to get majorities in the House and the Senate. And I really salute you for it.
Thanks, Joe. It takes a village. It takes all of us.
All right, Joe. Andres, I believe we've exhausted all the questions. Could you tell us how people can find out more about you, how they could volunteer for you, perhaps donate? Give us the information we need.
Absolutely. Well, first off, Larry, thank you for your years of service to this organization, to the executive officers. We certainly miss each other, and I was saddened to hear about our favorite Dragon View closing down and passing by that not too long ago. I didn't realize it had closed in the middle of all of it. So where's Cano been, I guess, is where my immediate response is. Thank you for the opportunity to join you all. As I said, it was important for me just to spend some time with you, even though my race is pretty much secure. And I want to thank you for your time in the chat. I've put my email, I've put my personal cell phone number. I've very, very deliberate about making sure that you have any opportunity to get a hold of me. So please always save my number in your phone book. And I also included my website. My race is gonna still require some investment. As you all know, it takes a lot to influence voters to go to the ballot box, go to their site, or to fill out their early ballot. And what I'm inspired by, Larry, is that in Southern Arizona, we know how to do this. We've been doing it for so long. We do it the right way. We get folks engaged. And I invite you to be a part of this campaign, to be a part of all of the varying efforts that are going to, at one point, we're going to remind ourselves and be like, hey, we got the gavel. We're here. I smell it. I see it. We're almost there, guys. Thank you for your time.
All right, Andres, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your holiday weekend to come and talk to us. It was fascinating to hear from you. I'll tell you, we are so fortunate to have you in the House of Representatives, and I'm glad to hear that you are unopposed. And with that, I'm going to have to draw the meeting to a close, and so everybody can get back to their barbecues. And with that, we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye.